She was rejected, broken, and left to die alone in the freezing woods until the night she found a wounded wolf on her doorstep and discovered he wasn't a beast at all, but an alpha king bound to her by destiny. A love written in blood and moonlight. A fate she never chose, but one she'll die to protect. The wind howled through the fir trees, carrying with it the voice of a winter that refused to die. The cabin creaked like an old ship at sea, the roof bowing under the relentless assault of sleet and wind. Inside, Alara Vale sat cross-legged by the dying fire, staring into the orange embers that had long since lost their warmth. The light flickered over her face, drawing deep shadows beneath her eyes that had forgotten how to dream. She pulled her father's old quilt tighter around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of smoke and pine, a remnant of better times. Before the silence, before the doctor's words, before Darian looked at her like a stranger. He had said the words so calmly it made her dizzy. "You can't have children, Alara. That's unfortunate." Unfortunate. As though her body's betrayal was merely a missed appointment. She remembered how he'd stood in that sterile white apartment, expensive suit, perfect posture. Every inch the successful lawyer who measured love in potential. His voice was smooth, deliberate, almost kind as he dismantled her. "You deserve someone who wants the same future you do." "But you are my future," she had whispered. He didn't answer. The door had closed softly, like a sentence being passed. That was 6 months ago. She'd sold her belongings, packed her father's truck, and fled to the one place that still remembered her name, the ridge cabin tucked deep within the iron pine woods. It had been her childhood fortress, a summer haven where her father had taught her how to fish, how to track, how to listen to the forest. Now it was her exile. She kept to routines to quiet the madness. Wake before dawn, chop wood, boil water, survive. But each night the silence grew heavier, pressing against her chest like a second heartbeat. Sometimes she spoke aloud, pretending her father still sat in his rocking chair near the stove. Sometimes she even answered herself. Tonight, the storm outside was feral. Sleet slamming against the glass, trees moaning under the weight of the wind. She should have felt safe inside. She didn't. The fire popped, and for a split second, she thought she heard footsteps beyond the door. She froze. No one came out here this far, not hunters, not hikers. She waited. Only the wind replied. When the lights flickered once, twice, then died, Alara's breath caught. She fumbled for a candle, striking the match with trembling fingers. The sudden flare of light was almost holy. Shadows danced across the walls, alive and restless. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not wind. A thud, heavy, wet, flesh against earth. Then a soft, broken cry. Alara's heart jolted. It wasn't human, too high-pitched, too desperate. The kind of sound that rips through logic and goes straight to instinct. She swallowed hard, glancing at the iron poker by the hearth. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Never ignore a wounded cry. Our nature always remembers kindness. Against every ounce of reason, she rose. Wrapping the quilt around her shoulders, she took the poker and approached the door. The handle was cold beneath her hand. When she opened it, the wind punched through the cabin, extinguishing the candle and drenching her in icy rain. The forest was a blur of black and silver. Her eyes adjusted, and that's when she saw it, a shape slumped against the porch steps. Huge, breathing shallowly. The storm hissed around it, but she could hear the faintest whine, a sound of pain and exhaustion. It was a wolf. No, not just a wolf. It was enormous, larger than any she had ever imagined. Its fur, dark as wet charcoal, clung to its sides, matted with blood. Its golden eyes flicked open, not feral, not mindless, but conscious, intelligent. And under its massive paw, trembling, was a cub. Alara's breath hitched. She tightened her grip on the poker, but didn't lift it. The creature raised its head weakly, meeting her gaze with something achingly familiar. Fear. Not of her, but for the tiny creature pressed against it. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered. Her voice was shaking, but her words were steady. "I just want to help." The wolf's chest rose and fell, its eyes half-lidding as though surrendering to something inevitable. A low rumble left its throat, not a growl, more a sigh. Lightning split the sky above them, and Alara saw the wound clearly, a brutal gash along its flank, deep and ragged. A trap, maybe. Poachers. The cub whimpered again, nudging its parent's face. Alara dropped the poker. In that moment, soaked to the skin and shaking with cold, she understood something simple and absolute. She couldn't leave them. "Okay," she whispered, stepping into the rain. "Okay, we'll figure this out." And without another thought, she knelt beside the dying beast. The storm swallowed her world. Icy water ran down her neck as she crouched on the porch beside the fallen wolf, her numb fingers trembling against the slick tarp she'd dragged from the mudroom. Every instinct screamed to get back inside, bolt the door, forget this moment ever happened. But the sight before her pinned her in place, a massive, broken animal shielding its whimpering cub even in unconsciousness. The great wolf's breathing came in ragged gasps, every exhale a wet rattle. The cub pressed itself into its parent's fur, crying softly. Alara's throat constricted. "You poor thing," she murmured. "Both of you." Her father's old lessons whispered through her thoughts like ghosts. "Always approach slow. Let them smell you first. Show your hands. Speak low." "Easy now," she said, her voice steadying as she inched closer. "It's just me." The wolf's single golden eye cracked open again. For a heartbeat, time froze, human and beast staring into each other through the haze of rain. It wasn't the look of a predator. It was a plea. "I need to move you," Alara said, dragging the tarp closer. "You'll freeze out here." When the creature didn't flinch, she took it as permission. She braced herself, grabbed two corners of the tarp, and pulled with everything she had. The soaked canvas barely shifted an inch. "Come on," she gasped, her muscles screaming in protest. Her boots slipped on the porch boards, knees cracking against the wood. "Don't you dare give up on me." A sound, faint but unmistakable, rumbled from the wolf's chest. A low growl? No. A breath. A response. With an effort that looked agonizing, it began to move. One foreleg, then the other, dragging its weight an inch at a time until most of its massive body rested on the tarp. Alara almost sobbed from relief. "Good, that's good. That's it." It took every ounce of her strength to pull the tarp and the enormous weight upon it across the porch, inch by inch, while the cub trotted nervously alongside. Mud and blood smeared the floorboards. When she finally crossed the threshold and got the wolf's bulk inside the cabin, she collapsed against the wall, chest heaving, soaked to the bone. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing them away from the storm. The sudden silence was almost deafening. Only the sound of her breath, the wolf's labored gasps, and the faint crackle of the dying fire. The room looked surreal, the wild and the domestic colliding. Mud, blood, and fur against the faded rug and flickering candles. The cub curled up beside its parent's muzzle, eyes wide, trembling. Alara swallowed hard. "Okay," she whispered to no one. "Let's try to fix this." She moved on autopilot, boiling water, ripping strips from an old bedsheet, rummaging for the first aid kit buried under camping supplies. Her hands shook as she cleaned the wound, wiping away blood that came faster than she could stop it. The wolf shuddered beneath her touch, but didn't move. When she spoke, her voice came out softer than she intended. "You're safe here. You hear me? You and the little one." The cub gave a small yip, as if answering. Hours bled together. She worked until her fingers were raw, until the fire burned bright again. When she finally leaned back, exhausted, the wound was wrapped in layers of cloth and tied tight with twine. The bleeding had slowed. Alara sat cross-legged in front of him, staring into those half-closed eyes that gleamed faintly gold in the candlelight. "You're going to make it," she said. "I didn't drag you through half a storm for nothing." The wolf blinked once, slow, deliberate. Gratitude? Maybe she imagined it. The cub waddled forward and, without fear, climbed into her lap. She froze. Its tiny body was warm, its fur soft and damp. It made a faint squeaking sound, then pressed its nose to her wrist. A small heartbeat fluttered beneath its ribs. And something broke open inside her. Months of numbness, the endless gray weight of loneliness, they cracked under that simple touch. She felt the faintest spark of life, fragile and wild. "You're too trusting," she whispered to the cub, brushing her fingers through its fur. "But I guess that makes two of us." The night dragged on. She built the fire higher, wrapping herself in blankets and listening to the rain fade to a dull hiss outside. Every so often, the wolf stirred, a twitch of muscle, a rumble in its throat. The cub whimpered, and she soothed it with whispered nonsense until it slept again. When she finally allowed herself to rest, her body folded into the rocking chair, exhaustion pulling her under. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was the faint glow of golden eyes reflecting the firelight. They watched her unblinking, ancient, knowing. When morning came, the world outside was white and silent. Snow had fallen overnight, a thick blanket burying the storm's violence. Inside, the air smelled of smoke, pine, and something earthy and new. Alara stirred awake, stiff and sore, blinking at the shape sprawled across her floor. For one heart-stopping second, she thought it had died. But then the wolf's chest rose and fell, slow, steady. "You made it," she breathed, her voice catching on a laugh that was half relief, half disbelief. The cub lifted its head and gave a tiny bark, tail wagging. Alara smiled for the first time in months. Her smile faded, though, as she caught sight of something impossible. The bandages she'd wrapped were already stained but dry. The wound beneath looked smaller, the angry swelling receding overnight. It wasn't just healing. It was closing, the torn flesh knitting itself together like a film played in reverse. Alara knelt, brushing her fingers over the edge of the cloth. "What are you?" she whispered. The wolf opened its eyes again, the gold of them burning brighter in the morning light. It looked at her, not as an animal looks at a human, but as an equal might look at another soul. The moment stretched between them, silent and alive. And deep within her chest, something whispered back. Not everything broken stays that way. The next few days passed in a rhythm Alara hadn't known since childhood, a rhythm of care, quiet, and purpose. Dawn bled slowly through the snow-muffled forest each morning, a dim light filtering through frost-coated windows. The fire never died. She made sure of it. The wolf, she'd started calling him Kale, though she didn't know why, was alive, and every morning he seemed a little stronger. The cub, who she decided to name Ash for his smoky gray fur, had transformed the cabin into something other than a graveyard of memories. He followed her everywhere, tumbling over her boots, chewing on chair legs, and occasionally trying to wrestle her blanket as if it were a rival pup. Alara scolded him gently, laughing more in those few days than she had in half a year. Kale watched her always. His eyes followed her when she moved, quiet, intelligent, unnerving. She caught herself speaking to him more than she should have, as if he were another person stranded beside her in that little wooden world. "Don't give me that look," she muttered one morning, stirring a pot of soup over the stove. "You're lucky I still have canned chicken left. You should have seen the grocery bill before I moved out here." Kale's massive head tilted slightly, one ear flicking. "And no," she continued, ladling broth into a bowl, "you can't have all of it. You're already eating like a bear." Ash yipped from the corner, tail wagging. The cub had learned that his cries often earned scraps, so now he wielded them like a weapon. Kale huffed through his nose, the sound suspiciously like amusement. Yeah, Alara said, rolling her eyes. "Don't mock me. I know I talk too much." But the cabin didn't feel so hollow anymore. The air no longer carried that dead, stagnant quiet. It was filled with life, soft breathing, the scrape of claws on wood, the crackle of fire. That night, when the wind outside sang through the trees like a ghost, Alara dreamed. She stood in the middle of a forest that glowed faintly silver under the moon. Snow fell in lazy spirals around her, each flake dissolving before it touched the ground. In the distance, a low growl echoed, not threatening, but calling. She turned, searching, her heart pounding. Elara. Her name whispered through the air, deep and rich, a voice she didn't recognize, but felt inside her bones. "Who's there?" she called, turning in slow circles. The trees shifted. From their shadows stepped a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, his skin glimmering faintly with frost. His eyes were molten gold. Her throat tightened. "Kale?" He smiled, a sad, beautiful thing that made her chest ache. "Not yet," he said, "but soon." Then the forest dissolved into light. Elara woke with a sharp gasp, her breath clouding in the cold air. The fire had burned low. Kale was awake, his head lifted, those same golden eyes locked on her from across the room. For one impossible second, she could swear they looked human. "You were watching me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He blinked slowly, unthreatening. "I dreamt about you," she murmured, then immediately shook her head. "God, listen to me. Talking to a wolf, like some." Kale made a low sound, almost like a hum. The same tone from her dream. Her words died in her throat. Something in the air shifted, a faint, electric tension that made her skin prickle. She rubbed her arms, unsettled. "You can't understand me," she whispered, though a small, traitorous part of her wondered if he could. Ash broke the silence by stumbling toward her, clumsy and wide-eyed. The cub licked her hand, tail wagging furiously. She laughed shakily, grateful for the distraction. "You at least are normal," she said. "Chaotic, but normal." Behind her, Kale exhaled, a deep, rumbling sigh that felt almost disappointed. Over the next days, Elara began noticing more impossibilities. Kale's wound, once gaping and angry, now looked weeks healed. The fur had regrown around it in dark silver streaks that shimmered when the light hit. Sometimes, when she touched his bandages, her fingertips tingled faintly, as if static danced under his skin. And his gaze, it was sharper than ever. Focused. Listening. She told herself she was imagining it, that isolation had finally cracked her sense of reality. But when she spoke aloud, he would tilt his head at the right moments. When she laughed, he made soft, rumbling noises that sounded suspiciously like answering chuckles. And when she sat by the fire reading, he sometimes made quiet, thoughtful huffs, like a person musing to themselves. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Yet she stopped fighting it. For the first time in months, she felt seen. Even if the eyes seeing her belonged to a creature from the wild. One night, as snow fell heavy outside and the cabin glowed with warmth, she crouched beside Kale with a steaming bowl of stew. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think silence was peace. After Darian left, I craved it. I thought if I hid long enough, the world would forget me." She gave a shaky laugh. "Turns out, silence just gets louder the longer you listen." Kale's ears flicked forward, and that strange sound, half rumble, half hum, rose in his chest again. The tone was low and comforting, vibrating through the air between them. Elara hesitated, tears pricking her eyes. "What are you, Kale?" she whispered. For a heartbeat, his eyes glowed brighter, like embers flaring. Then, as though answering her question, he leaned forward. His muzzle brushed her hand, barely, softly. Warmth surged through her fingers, running up her arm and into her chest. She gasped, eyes wide, pulling back instinctively. The wolf lowered his head, not threatening, just watching, waiting. Elara stared at her trembling hand. The warmth lingered, pulsing faintly beneath her skin like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Outside, the storm picked up again, rattling the windows. But inside, something ancient and new had awakened. And for the first time since her heart had broken, Elara felt fear. Not of being alone, but of what she was starting to believe. The wind had changed. Elara could feel it even from inside the cabin. It wasn't the wild, icy gusts of winter storms, but something older, more alive, as though the forest itself had begun to breathe differently. The snow fell slower now, in steady, deliberate flakes that seemed to listen. The air hummed faintly, a vibration that settled under her skin. Kale was restless. He paced when he thought she wasn't watching, muscles rippling under dark fur, his breath coming in short, misty bursts. His golden eyes flicked toward the windows often, sharp and wary. Ash followed him around like a shadow, mimicking every twitch, every pause, every tilt of his head. Alara watched from her chair by the fire, heart tight with unease. "What's out there?" she murmured. Kale stopped pacing, ears twitching. He looked at her for a long time before padding toward the door. He sniffed once at the crack beneath it, then let out a low, vibrating growl. The sound wasn't anger, it was warning. She stood slowly. "Kale?" He turned his head toward her, eyes gleaming with an intensity that pinned her in place. For the briefest heartbeat, the firelight caught his pupils just right, and they looked almost human. Alara's throat went dry. "I don't know what's happening," she whispered, "but you're scaring me." The wolf's growl faded. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them until his enormous head was level with her chest. Then, with deliberate care, he nudged her arm, a gesture so gentle, so clearly meant to reassure, that tears stung her eyes. "It's okay," she murmured, laying a trembling hand against his fur. "I trust you." That was when the first sound came, faint, distant, but unmistakable. A howl. Long, low, and resonant, it cut through the forest's silence like a blade. Kale stiffened. Ash whimpered and darted behind the table, tail between his legs. Another howl answered the first, closer this time. Then another. The sound built into a chorus. Not wild wolves, no, but something deeper, layered with an eerie echo that made the air thrum. Alara's pulse hammered in her ears. "There are others," she breathed. Kale's massive head turned toward the sound. He growled again, louder this time, the sound rolling through the cabin like thunder. Every hair on Alara's body stood on end. "Kale, stop," she said, stepping closer. "You're still hurt. Whatever they are, they'll hear you." But it was too late. The howl that answered came from so close it rattled the glass panes. Alara stumbled back, instinct screaming at her to hide. Kale's posture shifted, his entire body lowering, muscles bunching, teeth bared. The gentle creature she'd nursed for days was gone, replaced by something feral and magnificent, a king defending his realm. A heavy thud hit the porch. Then another. The boards creaked under the weight of something large. Alara's heart froze. She reached for the poker by the hearth, her breath shallow. Kale turned his head toward her, eyes locking with hers, golden, fierce, and strangely calm. He gave a short, low sound. A command. "Stay." The door shuddered as a heavy paw slammed against it. Ash whimpered from under the table. The second blow splintered the top hinge. Alara barely had time to shout before the door burst open, spraying shards of wood across the floor. In the doorway stood another wolf. It was huge, nearly Kale's size, its fur pale silver streaked with frost. Its eyes burned blue, cold and merciless. It snarled, stepping into the cabin with deliberate menace, its lips curling back to reveal gleaming fangs. Alara froze. Oh God. Kale lunged before she could move. The two wolves collided with a sound that shook the walls, snarls, claws, and snapping jaws. The fire guttered, throwing wild shadows across the room as they rolled, teeth flashing, bodies slamming into furniture. "Kale!" Alara screamed, uselessly. Ash darted from his hiding place, crying out in panic. She grabbed a log from beside the fireplace, her hands slick with sweat. The pale wolf pinned Kale against the floor, jaws closing around his shoulder. Kale let out a furious roar, not a howl, but a deep, almost human cry of pain. Without thinking, Alara swung. The log struck the pale wolf's flank with a dull crack. It yelped, twisting toward her, and she saw it then, in horrifying clarity. Its eyes weren't just blue. They were glowing. Unnatural.
Wrong.
The creature snapped at her, missing by inches. Kale surged up from beneath it, slamming the other wolf aside. His jaws clamped around its neck, and with a single brutal motion, he drove it backward through the doorway and into the snow. They crashed outside in a blur of fur and sound, their snarls fading into the storm. Alara ran to the door, gripping the frame for balance. Snow whipped her face, the cold cutting into her lungs. In the distance, she saw flashes of motion. Kale and the intruder locked in combat, dark and pale blurs in the white. The ground churned beneath their struggle. Then, after a terrible silence, only one form stood.
Kale.
He staggered forward, his breath steaming in the frigid air. Blood, too much blood, stained the snow beneath him. Alara ran out, barefoot, ignoring the freezing pain. "Kale," she cried, skidding to her knees beside him. He looked at her, eyes dulled but still golden. His body trembled. "Please," she whispered, "don't you dare leave me now." He took one shuddering breath, then, to her horror, collapsed against her, his enormous weight knocking her to the ground. Alara cradled his head in her lap. The snow fell faster, swirling around them like ghosts. "Stay with me, Kale," she said, tears blurring her vision. "You're not allowed to die. Not after everything." For a moment, she thought she heard him speak, not aloud, but in her mind. A voice deep and hoarse, whispering through the chaos. "Alara, run, they'll come for you next." Her heart stopped. She stared down at him, her breath clouding the air. "What did you say?" But Kale didn't answer. His body went still, his eyes sliding shut. The golden light within them flickered once, then dimmed. Behind her, somewhere in the forest, another howl rose, distant, mourning, and full of promise. The night had turned, and the forest had chosen its side. The snow swallowed the world. Alara could hear nothing but her own ragged breathing and the dull thunder of her pulse. Kale's body lay heavy against her lap, his black fur already crusted with frost. His breath came in shallow gasps that slowed with each one. "Don't you dare," she whispered, clutching his thick ruff. Her fingers came away slick with blood. "Kale, do you hear me? You don't get to leave me too." Ash whined beside her, nudging Kale's paw, desperate, confused. The cub's small body trembled from the cold and the scent of death creeping in. Alara's tears froze on her cheeks. She looked toward the cabin. The faint golden glow of the fire still flickered through the broken door. Warmth. Shelter.
Safety.
"Come on," she rasped, voice cracking. "We're going back inside." She wrapped both arms around Kale's neck, straining to pull. The effort was hopeless. He was too heavy, his limp weight unyielding. She sobbed once in frustration, breath shuddering from her chest. "Please, please help me," she whispered to no one. Anyone. And something did. The air thickened, hummed, like invisible strings being plucked all around her. The snow slowed in its descent, each flake hanging suspended midair. The forest, the storm, even her breath, everything froze in that single moment. Then Kale's chest expanded sharply beneath her hands. The sound that tore from his throat was nothing like a growl. It was a deep, resonant cry that vibrated through her bones, a sound of pain and power mingled. The snow erupted outward in a perfect ring, as though the earth itself had exhaled. Alara fell backward into the drifts, shielding her eyes from the light that burst around them. It wasn't blinding, but warm, golden, pulsing, alive. Kale's body lifted slightly off the ground, the glow outlining his shape until she could no longer tell where the wolf ended and the light began. "Kale," she shouted, though the word was swallowed by the wind. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The light vanished. The forest exhaled. The air was quiet again. Alara blinked through the haze, her chest tight with dread. Kale lay still, but not as before. His body had shifted. His fur receded into skin. His massive form seemed to collapse in on itself, reshaping, shrinking. Limbs reformed, bones twisting, cracking, reassembling with an impossible, graceful horror. She stumbled backward, one hand over her mouth, heart slamming against her ribs. Where the wolf had been, a man now lay in the snow. He was naked, his skin pale against the dark drifts, streaked with blood and mud. His hair was black as coal, long and tangled. Scars crossed his chest, old and new, like a map of every battle he had ever survived. But his face, even bloodied, held a kind of austere beauty that didn't seem possible. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips pale from the cold. And his eyes, though closed, she knew what color they would be. Gold. Alara staggered forward, her body acting before her mind caught up. She knelt beside him, shaking uncontrollably. "Kale?" she whispered, though the name now felt too small. "Oh my God!" His chest rose faintly, a fragile sign of life. She looked toward the cabin, then back at him. "Okay," she breathed, voice breaking. "Okay, we're not doing this again." It took everything she had to drag him back inside. His skin was feverish to the touch, too warm against the winter air. Each inch was agony. By the time she got him over the threshold, she was gasping, sweat freezing in her hair. She laid him by the fire, pulling the quilt over his body, her own hands trembling from exhaustion. Ash crept forward, sniffing at the man who smelled like his father, yet wasn't. The cub let out a confused, keening sound and then, remarkably, curled up beside him, pressing his tiny body against the man's ribs. Alara stared. "What are you?" she whispered again, her voice almost reverent. Hours passed. The fire burned low. She sat beside him, half afraid to blink. Once, his fingers twitched. Another time, he murmured something, words too faint to understand. But his breathing steadied. The gash on his side, the one that should have killed him twice over, began to close before her eyes, knitting together like thread through fabric. She reached out once, hesitating before letting her fingertips graze his temple. His skin burned under her touch, yet she didn't pull away. "You fought to protect me," she said softly. "You almost died because of it." Her voice trembled. "Who does that?" The man stirred, brow furrowing. Alara froze. His eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. His eyes glowed faintly gold in the dim light, less wild now, more aware. He blinked once, slowly, as if adjusting to a body that wasn't quite his. When his gaze finally found hers, something ancient flickered behind it. "You." His voice was rough, low, and utterly human. "You stayed." Alara's throat went dry. "You can talk," she whispered, then immediately flushed. "Of course he can talk, he's a man." He winced, shifting slightly. The movement made his muscles tense in pain. "I shouldn't be alive," he rasped. "You're welcome," she said before she could stop herself. It came out too sharp, too human, a crack in the surreal haze of the moment. A faint smile touched his lips, weak, but real. "You're braver than you should be," he murmured. "Or stupider," she muttered, sitting back on her heels. "I brought a dying wolf into my house. Now there's a what? A man on my floor who apparently was that wolf. So yeah, brave or stupid, you tell me." He looked at her for a long moment, the faintest flicker of amusement in his golden eyes.
"Both," he said simply.
"That's what saved me." Alara stared at him. "You have a name?" she asked finally. He nodded slowly.
"Kale."
She blinked. Your name is actually Kale?" His smile deepened, just slightly. "You called me that, didn't you? I heard you. Even when I couldn't move. Even when I wasn't this." Her chest tightened. "You heard me." "I heard everything," he said, his voice like a whisper through smoke. "Your loneliness. Your pain. Your courage." He glanced toward the fire, something unreadable flickering across his features. "It called to me." Alara's mind spun. None of this should have been real. And yet, sitting here with the impossible man who had been the creature she'd nursed back from death, it was. "What are you?" she asked again, this time louder. Kale's gaze lifted to hers, and in it she saw the truth before he spoke. "I am not just a wolf," he said softly. "I am one of the old kind, The last of the shifters, the line that guards the balance between man and beast.
His jaw tightened.
And, because you helped me, Alara Vale, the balance has shifted. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. Alara's heart pounded. What does that mean? Kale's eyes burned brighter. It means the world will come looking for you next. The fire crackled between them, throwing soft amber light over Kale's sharp features. The cabin, which had once been her sanctuary, now felt smaller, too alive, too heavy with secrets. Alara sat wrapped in her blanket, trying to make sense of the impossible. Across from her, Kale, still half-draped in her quilt, looked more exhausted than any human had a right to be, yet his gaze never wavered. You need to start explaining, she said at last. Everything. Kale nodded once, slow. You've earned the truth. His voice had changed since morning, steadier now, with an undercurrent of command that sent shivers up her spine. He turned toward the fire. My people lived hidden long before humans built cities. We were born of two natures, the flesh of man and the spirit of the wild. We kept the forests balanced, the rivers clear, the predators and prey in harmony. But as men spread, as steel and fire replaced root and stone, my kind grew fewer. Some went into hiding. Others, his eyes darkened, turned savage. Alara watched the flames dance in his golden gaze. Like the one that attacked you? Kale inclined his head. That was no wild beast. His name was Thane, once my brother-in-arms, now a slave to bloodlust. He leads those who believe humans should be driven out entirely. And you, she asked. What do you believe? Kale looked at her then, and the firelight caught the scar that curved along his collarbone, pale against his skin. I believe in balance. That's why they tried to kill me. The words hit her like stones. She wanted to say I'm sorry, but something told her he'd heard enough pity in his life. Instead, she whispered, why did you say the balance has shifted? Because I helped you. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, because when I was dying, I called to the forest for aid. And the forest sent you. When your hand touched me, the bond answered. The bond. Kale met her gaze, his voice low. Every shifter carries a life thread, a tether that can intertwine with another. It binds energy, emotion, spirit. It's rare. It's sacred. It only happens when two souls are meant to stand as one. Alara's throat went dry. You're saying... I'm saying that in saving me, you tied yourself to me. My strength flows through you, and yours through me. If one of us dies, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. That's insane. I didn't agree to anything. You didn't have to, Kale said quietly. The bond doesn't ask permission. It simply is. She stood, pacing across the small room, her mind spinning. So, I'm just, what, stuck with you forever? Kale's lips curved in the faintest smile. There are worse fates. Alara glared at him, but heat rose to her face. You're impossible. I'm alive because of you, he countered. And you're alive because I am. Call it what you will, but that is truth. She sank into the chair again, burying her face in her hands. I don't even know what I am anymore. He studied her quietly. You are still you, but now the forest knows your name. It will answer when you call. She looked up, startled. The forest knows me? Kale nodded. I can feel it already. The way it stirs when you move, the way the air hums when you speak. You have been claimed by its magic, Alara Vale. You cannot unmake that. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft pop of burning wood. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes, the distant crack of branches, the groan of snow shifting under weight. Kale's head lifted sharply. They're close. Who? He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, the quilt falling to the floor. The firelight caught the lines of his muscles, the faint sheen of sweat along his neck.
Hunters, he said.
Thane's men. They will have followed the blood trail. Alara's breath hitched. Human hunters? No, Kale said grimly. Worse. He limped to the window, pulling the curtain aside with care. His jaw tightened. 2, maybe 3. moving fast. Then we have to hide. Alara's mind leapt to her father's cellar beneath the floorboards. We can. Kale turned toward her, eyes blazing. They can smell us. They'll find you no matter where you hide. So what then? She demanded. We just wait for them to. The sound of snapping wood outside cut her off. Ash whined, backing toward her legs. Kale bared his teeth, his body already shifting. Bones cracking, muscles knotting, his form half-wolf before she could blink. Stay behind me, he ordered, his voice a growl halfway between human and beast. The door shuddered. Alara grabbed the iron poker again, heart hammering. I hate this door, she muttered, and Kale almost smiled before the first shadow burst through. A man-shaped figure landed heavily in the doorway, his eyes gleaming crimson. His skin looked stretched too tight, his teeth too long. Behind him, another crept low, pale hair streaked with blood. Alara froze. Those are shifters, Kale said. But not of my kind. Thane has twisted them. The first one grinned, voice slick as oil. Our alpha lives, then. The great Kale the Just. Hiding behind a human. Kale stepped forward, shoulders rolling, claws half-formed. Leave her out of this. The intruder's grin widened. You think we don't feel it? The bond. His red eyes slid toward Alara. She's marked, Kale. You've doomed her too. Alara's stomach turned to ice. What does that mean? She whispered. Kale didn't answer. He launched himself forward instead, hitting the shifter mid-sentence. They crashed into the snow outside, a blur of claws and teeth. The second shifter lunged for her. Alara swung the poker with every ounce of strength she had, the iron connecting with a sickening crack. The creature howled, stumbling, but didn't fall. Kale, she screamed. Her cry tore through the air, and something answered. The walls seemed to tremble, the air thick with unseen power. The hearth roared higher, flames surging bright green for an instant. The intruder froze, startled by the unnatural heat. Alara's vision blurred, and a pulse of energy exploded outward from her chest. The shifter was thrown backward, crashing into the snow with a strangled cry. When the light faded, Alara stood trembling, the poker still clutched in her shaking hands. Kale turned, golden eyes wide with shock. What did I just do? She whispered. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. You called the forest, he said hoarsely. And it answered. Outside, the wind howled again, no longer a song of winter, but a warning. The forest had chosen its champion. And Alara was no longer just a woman who'd hidden from the world. She had become something new, something bound by fate and fire. The fire refused to die that night. It burned green and gold, the colors of both forest and flame. The heat licked at the cabin walls, yet the snow outside still howled, pressing against the windows as if trying to suffocate the world within. Alara sat on the floor, back against the hearth, the poker lying forgotten beside her. Her hands still trembled from what had just happened. Power, real, impossible power, had surged through her veins. It wasn't adrenaline. It was alive. It had spoken in the language of the wind and fire. Across the room, Kale was silent. Blood ran down his temple from a shallow cut, but the other shifters were gone. Their broken bodies vanished into the blizzard's mouth. He leaned against the wall, his bare chest streaked with dirt and snowmelt, golden eyes fixed on her like a man trying to solve a riddle carved into his own skin. You shouldn't be able to do that, he said at last. Yeah, well, Alara shot back, her voice rough. I shouldn't be able to survive in a forest with a shape-shifting wolfman either, but here we are. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. You called the forest. Only bonded shifters can draw on that energy. I didn't call anything, she said. I was just scared. Kale pushed himself upright with a pained grunt, crossing the room in slow, deliberate steps. Fear wakes the truth faster than faith ever could, he murmured. He crouched beside her, his voice gentler now. Alara, what you did tonight, it's the forest's magic, channeled through our bond. It's a defense, a shield. But it comes at a price. She looked up sharply. What price? He hesitated, his jaw tightening. When one of us draws on it, it takes from the other. Strength, energy, sometimes life itself. The words hit her like a cold wave. You mean when you cast the fire, he finished quietly, it drained me. I felt it. Alara's chest clenched. Then why didn't you stop me? Kale's gaze softened. Because I'd rather bleed than see you broken. She turned away, hiding her face from the weight of that look. You can't keep saying things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because I'll start believing them. Silence fell. The fire popped, scattering embers across the stone. Kale's hand brushed one away before it reached her foot. His skin was hot, almost feverish. You shouldn't believe words, he said, his voice rough. Believe actions. You risked your life for mine. That's all I need to know. Alara swallowed hard. And what do I need to know? That your life is no longer small, Kale said. The world has found you. It won't let you go back. The storm outside began to quiet. In its place came the sounds of the forest returning, the whisper of wind through branches, the distant crack of ice. Somewhere far beyond the treeline, a low, echoing howl rolled through the night. Kale stiffened instantly. That's not Thane, he said. Then who? My pack, he said, and for the first time, his voice cracked, not from fear, but something deeper. They've found me. By morning, the woods were silver and still. The sky, clear for the first time in days, bled pale light through the frost. Kale stood at the cabin door, dressed in the spare clothes she'd given him, her father's old flannel shirt hanging open over his scarred chest, dark trousers rolled to his bare feet. He looked both out of place and entirely at home. Alara stood beside him, arms crossed against the cold. So, she said, do I need to make coffee for your wolf friends? He gave a quiet laugh. They'll prefer raw meat. Of course they will. The laughter faded from his eyes as he scanned the treeline. You don't understand what this means, Alara. My pack, what's left of it, will know what you are. The bond can't be hidden. Is that bad? She asked. For them, it's sacred. For others, he paused, searching for words. It's dangerous. Some will see you as my equal. Others will see you as a weakness. Then I guess they'll just have to see me as both, she said simply. Kale turned his head, studying her. There was admiration in his gaze, but also something softer, heavier, reverence, maybe. You speak like an alpha, he said quietly. Before she could answer, a movement in the trees caught her eye. Shadows shifted. Then, one by one, 3 figures emerged from the forest's edge, tall, human-like, their presence commanding even from a distance. Kale stepped forward. Stay behind me, he murmured. Not a chance. The first figure stopped a few yards away. He was older than Kale, his silver-streaked hair falling to his shoulders, his eyes the color of frost. Kale of the Iron Pine, he said, voice formal but taut with relief. You live. Kale inclined his head. Barely. The elder's gaze flicked to Alara. And the human? Kale's tone hardened. She saved me. She carries the bond. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The woman among them, cloaked in ash-gray fur, took a step forward, her eyes bright with wonder. The prophecy, she breathed. The wolf and the heartborn. Alara blinked. The what now? Kale's jaw clenched. Not here. The elder nodded once. Then come. Thane's hunters are regrouping. The valley is no longer safe. You and your bondmate must return to the den. Alara hesitated. Your den? As in, the place full of people who may or may not want to kill me. Kale's golden eyes met hers. They will not harm you. I swear it. She stared at him for a long moment, weighing fear against trust. Then finally she nodded.
Fine.
But if anyone calls me bondmate, I'm punching them. For the first time in what felt like years, Kale smiled. A real, unguarded smile. I'll warn them, he said. As they disappeared into the frost-bound forest, Alara looked back at the cabin one last time. Smoke still rose from the chimney, curling into the morning sky like a final goodbye. Her life, as she'd known it, was over. But in its place, something wilder had begun. A life bound to a man who wasn't just man, and a destiny that the forest itself seemed to whisper her name for. The journey through the Iron Pine Mountains was both brutal and breathtaking. For 2 days, they walked beneath towering trees older than empires, their trunks gnarled and silvered with frost. The air was sharp enough to burn her lungs, but Alara pressed on. Kale led the way, his stride easy even on the steep paths, while the 3 shifters followed at a distance, silent as ghosts. When she wasn't watching her step, she watched him. There was something regal about the way Kale moved now, more than the careful grace of a predator. It was authority, quiet and absolute. Yet beneath that command, she saw the same exhaustion she'd seen by the fire, the kind of weariness born not of battle, but of burden. At dusk on the 2nd day, the trees began to thin. The land sloped downward into a vast basin, walled by cliffs of pale stone. Waterfalls spilled from the cliffs like ribbons of light, feeding into a river that cut through the valley floor. Smoke rose from hollowed caverns and treetop platforms. It wasn't a village. It was an ecosystem built in secret harmony, part forest, part fortress. Alara stopped in her tracks. "This is your home." Kale nodded. "Welcome to the Denver." The words seemed to vibrate in the air. As they descended, figures emerged from shadow. Men and women with the same golden or silver eyes, some half-shifted with ears or claws still visible. Children darted between the roots of massive pines, their laughter wild and unrestrained. And yet, as soon as the strangers noticed Alara, silence rippled through the crowd. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Alara felt the weight of their scrutiny, like a physical thing. She tugged at her coat, wishing she looked less like a woman who'd stumbled out of a storm and more like someone who belonged in a legend. A whisper rippled through the gathering. "The human, the heartborn, she carries the Alpha's mark." "Heartborn," she muttered under her breath. "If that's another word for outsider, I'm going to scream." Kale's hand brushed hers, brief, grounding. "It means something different here." They reached the heart of the valley, a wide circle paved in smooth stone. A massive oak stood in the center, its roots twisting outward like veins, its branches hung with hundreds of glowing orbs. The light within them pulsed faintly, as if breathing. "The heart tree," Kale said. "The spirit that binds our pack." The elder from before stepped forward. "It recognizes her," he murmured. And indeed, the orbs had begun to brighten as Alara approached, their light casting her in a soft golden halo. Alara froze. "I didn't do anything." "That's the point," said the woman with ash-gray fur. "It answers only to those it chooses." Kale bowed his head, his voice formal again. "Elder Rowan, I bring before you Alara Vale. She is bound to me by the forest's will." Rowan studied her with unreadable eyes. "The bond has not appeared in generations," he said softly. "And never with a human." "I didn't exactly sign up for it," Alara said. To her surprise, Rowan smiled. "The forest doesn't ask permission, child. It only reveals truth." Alara let out a shaky laugh. "You all really need to start putting that on warning labels." A ripple of laughter passed through the gathered shifters, low, uncertain, but genuine. For a moment, the tension broke. Kale's lips curved faintly. Then Rowan raised his hand. "Kale of the Iron Pine," he said, voice echoing through the hollow. "You return to us wounded but not broken. Your brother Thane grows in power, his hunger spreading to the northern packs. You bring us hope and danger." Kale inclined his head. "Then we face both, as we always have." Rowan's gaze flicked to Alara again. "And her? Does she understand what her bond means?" Kale hesitated, and Alara jumped in before he could answer. "I know it means I'm apparently radioactive. Half of you think I'm a prophecy, and the rest might want me dead. That's about the gist of it, right?" A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Kale shot her a look that was half warning, half admiration. Rowan chuckled. "You have fire in you.
Good.
You'll need it." He gestured to one of the glowing orbs hanging from the tree. Approach. Alara glanced at Kale, who gave a small nod. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. The closer she got, the warmer the air became, like standing before the sun. The orb pulsed once, then drifted downward until it hovered at her chest height. Without thinking, she reached out. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the light surged, a rush of gold and green that poured into her skin. Images flooded her mind, wolves running beneath a moonlit canopy, fire blooming from their paws, a woman's voice whispering in a language she didn't know but somehow understood. Heartborn and fongbound, their spirits entwine. When shadow rises, so too must the divine. She gasped and stumbled back, clutching her chest. The orb dimmed and floated away. What did you see? Rowan asked quietly. Alara looked from him to Kale, her voice shaking. A prophecy, she said. Something about me and him. About stopping the shadow. Rowan's face turned grave. Then it's true. The old song returns. What song? She demanded. Kale's expression darkened. The one that ends in blood, he said softly. That night, they gave her a place to sleep, a small den carved into the cliffside, lit by glowing moss. Ash curled up at her feet, already asleep. Alara lay awake, staring at the ceiling of woven roots. Her life had changed so completely that she barely recognized herself. She had gone from broken and forgotten to being part of something ancient, something vast. But power and destiny came with a price, and she could feel it humming through her veins, whispering that the world had begun to move around her. As she drifted toward sleep, a faint sound reached her through the rock, the echo of Kale's voice in another chamber, low and urgent. She doesn't know what she's capable of, he said. And you, came Rowan's reply. Do you? Kale's silence was answer enough. Alara rolled over, pressing her hand to her chest where the orb had touched her. Her heartbeat felt strange now, too steady, too synchronized, as if keeping time with another's. The bond. She closed her eyes, and somewhere deep in the forest, she felt Kale do the same. 3 days passed in the den, though time felt distorted, warped by the endless twilight that hung over the valley. Alara learned to breathe forest air, to listen for meaning in silence, and to ignore the stares that followed her wherever she went. Some of the pack had warmed to her quickly, curious about the human who carried the Alpha's bond. Others avoided her altogether, whispering that her presence had drawn Thane's wrath closer. Only Kale remained a constant, guarding, watching, teaching her the language of their world. Still, he kept a distance, and that hurt more than she cared to admit. It was Rowan who broke the fragile calm. The blood moon rises in 2 nights, the elder announced, his voice carrying over the den's gathering circle. Tradition demands the trial. If Kale is to reclaim full authority as Alpha, and if the bond is truly sanctioned, his mate must be tested before the pack. The murmurs started instantly. Human. She won't survive. It's madness. Alara looked from the faces around her to Kale's grim expression. Trial, she asked. As in a test. Kale's jaw clenched. As in approving. They'll expect you to demonstrate your connection, to show that the bond is real.
How?
Rowan met her gaze. You'll enter the hollow of echoes at moonrise. If the heart tree accepts you, it will show your truth.
If not, his pause said enough.
Alara felt the chill of every eye on her. What happens if not? Kale's golden gaze locked with hers. Then the forest itself rejects you, and you'll never leave the hollow alive. The day before the trial, Kale took her to the cliffs above the river. The air there smelled of pine sap and snowmelt. Below them, the valley shimmered in the early dusk, the heart tree's light pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Tell me everything, Alara said, crossing her arms. I'm tired of being half-informed.
Kale didn't turn.
The hollow is older than any pack. It listens to the magic in your blood. It will know your fear, your lies, your truth. And if I'm not meant for this? His voice was a whisper. Then I lose you. She looked at him, startled by the rawness of it. You'd survive. Surviving isn't the same as living. The wind caught his hair then, and for a moment he looked more wolf than man, feral, beautiful, and heartbreakingly alone. She stepped closer. Kale, I didn't ask for this bond, but I'm not going to run from it. Or from you. He turned toward her, eyes burning gold. You speak like fate itself. Maybe fate's tired of being ignored. Something flickered in his expression, half pride, half despair. He reached out, fingers brushing her jaw, his touch featherlight. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember this, you were never chosen by accident. When the blood moon rose, the world turned red. Every wolf in the den gathered around the hollow's mouth, a vast cavern at the base of the cliffs. The heart tree's glow reached even here, its roots twisting downward like frozen rivers of light. Alara stood beside Kale at the entrance, her breath visible in the cold air. The weight of the pack's gaze pressed on her shoulders like armor. Rowan stepped forward, staff in hand. The forest watches. Let it see your truth. Kale's hand brushed her back once, a silent promise. Then she stepped into the dark. The hollow swallowed all sound. No echo of her footsteps. No whisper of wind. Just stillness, deep and total. She carried a torch, though the faint silver glow from the roots guided her path. The deeper she went, the warmer the air became, until her breath no longer fogged before her. The ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, like walking on the belly of some sleeping giant. Then she reached it, the heart of the hollow. A pool lay before her, perfectly still, reflecting the blood-red moonlight filtering down through cracks in the stone. It looked shallow, but the light within it seemed to have no bottom. Her reflection stared back, pale, uncertain, fragile. So, she whispered, voice trembling. You want truth? Here it is.
I'm terrified. I'm angry.
I don't understand why I'm here, or what I'm supposed to be. But I'm done running. I'm done being told I'm broken. Her reflection didn't move. The silence pressed tighter. I saved Kale because I couldn't stand to lose something else, she said louder now. And somewhere between fear and frostbite, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was worth saving too. The water rippled. Please, she whispered, voice breaking. If this is real, if any of it is real, show me who I'm supposed to be. The pool shimmered once, then exploded with light. Alara gasped, falling backward as energy surged up through her limbs. The light crawled beneath her skin, searing but not painful. Images flashed through her mind, Kale's eyes, the heart tree, wolves circling under crimson skies. And then something else. A man cloaked in shadow, red eyes gleaming like coals.
Thane.
His voice slithered through her thoughts. You think the forest loves you? It only wants to use you. It always does. Get out, she hissed, clutching her head. But the voice laughed. When the alpha falls, you'll fall too. You're two halves of a dying star. The red light flared brighter, so bright it pierced her bones. She screamed. And then, Kale's voice, distant but fierce. Alara. Fight it. Don't let him in. The bond. She could feel it, his heartbeat echoing inside her, frantic and strong. She reached for it, clung to it, poured every ounce of her will into that connection. The darkness shrieked once, then shattered. The light died. When Alara opened her eyes, she was kneeling at the pool's edge, gasping for air. Her reflection looked back, except it wasn't just hers anymore. Her eyes gleamed gold. Outside, the heart tree erupted in a blaze of light that lit the entire valley. The wolves fell to their knees as the energy washed over them. Kale's head snapped up, awe flooding his face. She did it, he breathed. Rowan's voice was reverent.
No, Alpha.
She became it. Alara emerged from the hollow, the torch long extinguished, but her body glowing faintly with the same gold-green fire she'd seen before. Her steps were steady, her gaze clear. Kale met her halfway, his hands gripping her shoulders. Alara, what happened? She looked up at him, her golden eyes bright even under the moon. The forest spoke. The dawn rose over the iron pine mountains like a bleeding wound. Scarlet light bled through the mist, painting the frost-laden trees in eerie shades of red and gold. Beneath that haunted sky, the pack prepared for war. Alara stood on the ridge above the den, the heart tree's glow pulsing faintly behind her. The whispers of its roots brushed her mind like a heartbeat not her own. It whispered names, memories, fragments of something older than words. And among them, one name pulsed like thunder, Thane. She could still see him, the figure from her vision. The same gold eyes as Kale, but darker, fractured, filled with hunger. She didn't know whether he'd been born that way or broken into it. She only knew the bond inside her trembled whenever his name was spoken. Kale appeared beside her, silent as wind. His shoulders were wrapped in a black cloak, the clasp shaped like a wolf's fang. The air around him shimmered faintly with magic, the dormant strength of a king returning to life. "The Iron Hollow lies 2 valleys north," he said, "beyond the river gorge. It was once sacred ground before Thane defiled it." Alara looked at him, her jaw tight. "That's where he's waiting." He nodded. "And that's where this ends." The journey began at twilight. 6 wolves moved through the forest, silent as breath, their paws leaving no print in the frost. Alara followed in their midst, every step echoing with the pull of the bond. Her senses had sharpened since the trial. She could feel the pulse of life under the soil, hear the shift of air when birds took flight miles away. It frightened her, this new awareness, yet she couldn't deny how right it felt.
Kale noticed.
He always noticed. "You feel it now," he murmured as they crossed the frozen river. "The forest answers your heartbeat." "It's loud," she admitted. "Like it's trying to speak through me." "It is," Kale said. "It's warning you." Alara frowned.
About what?
He met her gaze. That fate rarely asks before it takes. By the time they reached the gorge, the light was gone. The Iron Hollow yawned below, an enormous cavern, its entrance marked by blackened stones and the stench of decay. A dead forest stretched around it, the trees stripped of bark and life. Kale shifted form, bones cracking, black fur rippling over his skin. The Alpha stood before her again, not the wounded creature from that stormy night, but the full, terrifying legend. His eyes gleamed gold in the dark. "Stay behind me," he rumbled. "Not a chance," she said. He turned his head slightly, one golden eye catching hers. Stubborn human. Alpha wolf. They moved together into the dark. Inside, the hollow pulsed with its own strange heartbeat. The walls glistened like veins of obsidian, faintly red as if light came from within the stone itself. And at the center of that infernal glow stood Thane. He was taller than Kale, broader, his fur silver and black, his eyes burning a deep crimson. A twisted crown of bones circled his brow, a mockery of leadership. "So it's true," he said, his voice smooth and venomous. "My noble brother has returned, with a human on his leash." Alara's stomach tightened. "Funny, you talk a lot for someone hiding in a cave." Thane's grin revealed sharp teeth. "You have her spirit, brother. That's what drew the forest to her. But you don't see what I see, do you? The bond between you, it's not a gift. It's a cage." Kale's growl reverberated through the chamber. "You know nothing of her." "Oh, I know enough," Thane sneered. "You share blood, heart, power. But when one dies," his gaze shifted to Alara. "So does the other." Alara froze. "That's what you meant," she said quietly. "The price of the bond." Kale's silence was answer enough. Thane laughed, a hollow, thunderous sound. "I can end both of you and inherit the forest's power in one breath. The balance will fall, and the world will remember my name." The floor cracked. Shadows spilled from his hands, living smoke twisting into monstrous forms. Kale shifted fully, his roar shaking the cavern. He lunged, claws raking through the dark fog, but every wound he made closed instantly. Thane's magic wasn't flesh, it was hunger. "Alara." Kale's voice echoed in her mind through the bond. "Call the forest now." She pressed her palm to the ground, the cold stone burning against her skin. "Hear me," she whispered. "Please hear me." At first, nothing. Then a whisper. 1,000 voices layered into one. Heartborn. Fong-bound. Keeper of balance.
Rise.
Light erupted from beneath her hand, gold and green weaving up her arm. The cavern shuddered. The black vines of Thane's magic hissed as the light touched them. He snarled. No! Kale tore through the dark, slamming into his brother. The two collided with the force of a storm.
Tiet met flesh, klos met bloed.
Alara's heart raced in tandem with Kale's. She felt every wound, every ounce of pain. She screamed, the power spilling out of her in waves. The ground cracked open, roots of light surging from the floor, wrapping around Thane's limbs, dragging him toward the fissure. Thane's eyes locked with hers, filled not with rage, but desperation. You think you're saving him? He hissed. You're sealing his fate. The forest doesn't give, it consumes. Alara hesitated for a heartbeat. Then she met his gaze squarely. Then it'll consume me too. The roots pulled tighter. The light exploded, blinding and absolute. When the brilliance faded, the hollow was silent. The walls no longer pulsed red, only pale stone remained. Thane was gone, his crown shattered to dust. Alara collapsed, trembling, her hands scorched with golden lines. Kale was beside her in an instant, shifting back, his body covered in blood but his eyes, still gold, still alive. He caught her before she fell. It's over. She looked up at him weakly. You're hurt. So are you. She managed a faint smile. Guess that's balance. He laughed softly, his forehead resting against hers. You are the bravest soul I've ever known. And you, she murmured, are the worst patient. Days later, the den was alive with song. The heart tree shone brighter than ever, its light spreading through every root and stream. Rowan declared it an omen, the balance restored. Kale stood at the edge of the valley, the wind tugging at his cloak. Beside him, Alara gazed out over their world. Her hand brushed the scar that ran across his shoulder, a mark of their shared battle, their shared destiny. They'll call you Alpha King now, she said softly. He smiled. Only because the queen refuses the title. Alara's eyes met his. Queen? I thought you said I was just a stubborn human. You still are, Kale said. But you're also mine. He leaned down, pressing his lips to hers, not as a vow, but as a recognition. The bond between them thrummed once, pulsing through the trees, through the air, through the living forest that had chosen them both. In that heartbeat, Alara felt it, the truth the forest had whispered all along. She hadn't been chosen because she was broken. She'd been chosen because she endured. Because even in a world of beasts and kings and ancient magic, the human heart remained the wildest force of all. Seasons passed. The Iron Pine Valley healed, and with it, so did she. The wolves called her Heartborn Queen, though she never wore a crown. She and Kale rebuilt their world, stone by stone, promise by promise. And sometimes, when the moon rose full and bright, they would walk together beneath the stars. She'd feel the bond hum between them, steady, eternal, alive. No longer a burden, no longer a curse, but destiny, shared and chosen. And so, Alara and Kale's story ends where it began, not in the silence of loneliness, but in the wild song of a world reborn. From rejection to redemption. From the edge of death to the heart of destiny. The forest may sleep again, but its whispers remain. Reminders that even the most broken hearts can awaken ancient magic, and that love, when it's real, doesn't just save you. It changes you. If you felt that spark, if you love dark fantasy worlds where love walks hand in hand with danger, then join our pack. Hit subscribe and let the next story find you.